Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever this may find you. Welcome to Venture 360, a regular series of live and in-person events related to Canadian entrepreneurship and immigration, brought to you by Toronto-based NextStars. My name is Rick Spence. I'm proud to be an advisor to NextStars. I'll be your moderator today. We're coming to you live from Toronto to discuss an issue that is, frankly, a bit of a problem for Canada, the startup visa program. More than a decade ago, our federal government launched a visionary startup visa program designed to attract the best and brightest entrepreneurs here to Canada. The program started well, it was well received, it was pretty bold, but in recent years, it's gotten a bit more complex. It's now facing fulfillment problems and delays, and we're trying to do what we can to fix it. So we're here today to talk about that candidly and constructively, to try to surface some new ideas to get the program working. And if you're interested in entrepreneurship and immigration or the future of Canada, please get ready for a great conversation. To discuss this issue, we have a panel of three very qualified professionals. Zohra Jaffer is a partner in the Canadian immigration practice of KPMG Law, LLP, with more than 12 years of dedicated experience in corporate immigration law. Pantea Jafari runs Jafari Law here in Toronto, specializing in business and commercial law, immigration and litigation services for governments, individuals, and immigration communities. And here in studio with me is Saeed Zeinali, founder of NextStars, a venture studio that helps visionary entrepreneurs, whether Canadian or international, turn groundbreaking ideas into thriving businesses. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to offer up some brief opening statements on the topic of how to fix Canada's startup visa program, and then we'll get into a free-for-all discussion on this important issue. If you have questions for our panel, please share them in the chat. So to start off, I'll call on Saeed Zeinali to give us a bit more background on the startup visa program and his recommendations for the future. Saeed.
Of course. Thank you, Rick, and thank you everyone for joining us. Well, to give a little bit of background, the Startup Visa program was really a bold idea. It was meant to position Canada as really a magnet for entrepreneurial talent, to attract founders that want to build real companies, create high-paying jobs, and contribute to our economy. But today, I think the program is structurally a little bit misaligned and is facing some challenges. It's placing responsibilities on stakeholders that fall a little bit outside of their core expertise. For example, some immigration firms are now getting involved in the business of venture building, or something that is a little bit far beyond their original scope. Some designated organizations also, instead of really putting their focus and support in supporting entrepreneurs upon their arrival, connecting them with the startup house, with fundraising, and really getting them to revenue, are basically using their times in preparing founders that sometimes they're not even ready for a letter of support. And also, IRCC is increasingly expected to assess elements like business viability and traction areas that's difficult to evaluate without a dedicated economic lens. This has caused the system to stretch and a little bit, and the policy framework has not really evolved over the course of the program existence as much. Top of that, because that's one of the reasons that we lack a viable, coherent business immigration strategy in Canada. Many people are seeing startup visa as the only way to get a permanent residency. And this really reduces this risk that we reduce the program as really a workaround to maximize the potential for getting a permanent residency and minimizes the potential to drive real economic value. Back in last April, a year ago roughly, IRCC came down and announced a major cut, limiting each designated entity to just 10 letters of support per year. And the most recent update from the IRCC listed the wait time for permanent residency under the startup visa program for 40 months. That's more than 3 years. Entire startup life cycle lost to waiting. So today, we are dealing with two problems in my view. Number one is the current backlog, which is estimated to be around 30,000 files. That's not just delay, it's basically a credibility crisis, in my view. Second, the future of the program. How do we fix the program in a way that's just not reactive, but is strategic and is aligning with the problems of today Canada and recognizes our Canadian position on the world stage? I think the solution that we have to come up with has to stand on three pillars. Number one, program fidelity. What do I mean by that? Clear expectations and defined milestones for startups and designated organizations. This protects brand Canada and restores trust in the process. Number two, economic impact. Does the program result in high paying Canadian jobs? And are we building globally competitive companies here in Canada? And that has to be really the benchmark. Number three, skill alignments. Are we helping the prospective entrepreneurs and investors coming through this program to grow and contribute to Canadian economy? Are we making full use of the talent we're bringing? And unfortunately, currently the answer is often no. As Mr. Colin Singer, a respected immigration lawyer, wrote in his article, which he shared the link in the comment sections of this LinkedIn Live, we need to focus on striking a balance between accessibility and selectivity. I think this principle should guide any renovation that we are going to do to the program. As Rick and I, we said in our recent Financial Post comment, and we'll share the link also to that article in the chat section. While Canada hesitates, other countries have doubled down. They're acting with urgency and clarity while we're still kind of in a little bit of debate. We don't need to throw the program out. It's a very good program, but we do need to renovate it and review it with alignments, with purpose, and with the long-term view of what kind of entrepreneurship we want to attract and grow in Canada. And frankly, we are already starting to lose people. At NextStars, we are helping global entrepreneurs, and we have had clients reluctantly looking for elsewhere. You know, the latest, we had a client that came to us and asked for us to do the startup visa to Japan. And yes, Japan has a startup visa program. That's the level of frustration sometimes we have to deal with. So the question is, how can we fix the program? How can we make improvements? And how can we inform policymakers with some practical, underground, experienced, weathered solutions that can lead to positive change and improvement into the program? Thank you, Rick.
Wow, thank you, Saeed. You gave us a lot to think about. I particularly like your idea of that one benchmark. Are we building globally competitive companies in Canada? Because that's a great metric to use and ask. So for our next speaker is Zohra Jaffer from KPMG Law. Zohra, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, first I want to say thank you for having me on the panel. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be along with my co-panelist. Some pretty great names within the industry. So big thank you for that. Look, you know, to Saeed's point, the program is very well intentioned. You know, Canada needs entrepreneurs. We understand that there is a true need for really innovative businesses to come into Canada. So, you know, there are a lot of things that can be done. Some are, you know, pretty immediate, quick things that can be done to help the program kind of come back to where we want to see it. And one simple thing would be getting those processing times down. When the program started, we were looking at 4 to 6 months for permanent residence processing. Now, you know, you may get a work permit in 4 to 6 months, maybe, you know, so it just needs to be aligned a lot more closely with what the program was intended to do, to get business owners here quickly, right away, with some level of predictability and transparency. And so, you know, one way to do it, you know, we can chat a little bit more about how to do this practically, but having a group of officers that are dedicated to these types of applications would go a really long way, right? And they need to be trained officers who understand, your startup visa application is not going to look like your open spousal work permit or your study permit or even other work permit types. So having, really appropriate training done, and then having processing times that are consistent with what the needs of the program are. We have processing times for programs like Express Entry, and sure, they do fluctuate and maybe they're not accurate in 100% of cases, but generally speaking, you have a sense as to when your Express Entry application is going to be processed and finalized. And something that adheres closer to that from a timing perspective, we went from 4 to 6 months to 12 months to 24 months, and now we're 3.5 years, where that's just so daunting when you talk to somebody at the early stages to say you'll have your application reviewed in 40 months. That's really not going to be compelling, and it's not going to make the program attractive. So reducing those processing times is definitely something that needs to be addressed and worked on. Another thing that we're hearing about often is the designated organizations, and perhaps there may be a few bad apples, perhaps there may be a lack of support or information that we're seeing from the designated organizations. And so, really looking at the designated organizations and requiring the designated organizations to have a much more robust role, not just behind the scenes, in the information that's provided to IRCC. Be very clear about the business model validation, the due diligence details, have a vetting system in place for periodic reviews, as opposed to, just having an officer at some point in the processing of the PR application ask for an update on the business. That's really not going to be sufficient. So moving some of this over to the designated organization and requiring the designated organization to provide more regular and consistent information to IRCC is going to help demonstrate kind of the legitimacy of these businesses. Another quick one is the digital tracking system. So, when the system started initially, we were mailing out paper applications, and your tracking was your FedEx number to see if it actually got to the office, and then you were waiting for some time to see if somebody opened your package. And so, sure, we now have a PR portal, and you file through the PR portal, and so that does make things a bit better, but there's no file number that's assigned in the same way that you have a file number through Express Entry. And it seems, it's very difficult to follow up on an application when you don't have that file number. We'll try to reach out, and the request is, you don't seem to have an active case in the system, so we can't provide you an update. And so things like that seems to be a very quick and easy fix. Assign a file number when the applications are submitted electronically, one that is trackable, so that we as counsel can give that information to our clients, but clients themselves can go in and see where their application is, and not just at the later stages, right? Right from the outset, we want to be able to have that transparency. And another one I will talk about a little bit more closely is the disconnect between the work permit and permanent residence. If you can't get to Canada, it's very difficult to launch a business. If you're waiting 40 months to launch a business that's meant to be innovative and perhaps, some on the breakthrough of some type of a technology, it is, almost insurmountable. So looking at a better linkage between the two of those would definitely improve. And the last one is just publishing more information annually without, necessarily having ATIPs that have to be submitted. Just consistent information that comes out, on the approval rates, the reasons for the refusals, processing performance, and what the program, is if it's being refined, what does that look like? We over the years practicing have seen an officer in 2018 is looking at something that's completely different from an officer in 2020 and 23 and 25. And so having that information publicly available so people know what the expectation is of them when an application is filed. So I can absolutely talk about each of those in a lot more depth, and hopefully we'll get a chance to kind of get into some of that. But just, those are top of mind, some of the ways in which this program can be updated and made to be a lot more competitive and just a lot more attractive to the everyday user.
Thank you so much, Zohra. That's an amazing list of things to accomplish. It all sounds very reasonable and rational and objective. We'll talk a little bit later about how much of it is actually possible. But before we get there, we do want to hear from our third panelist, Pantea Jafari of Jafari Law.
Thank you. So thank you again for having me on this panel as well. And both panelists have spoken a lot about honesty, transparency, and I guess that's my biggest quirk, so to speak, my biggest problem with immigration processing of late, especially. And I think the program could be immediately improved drastically, even just with those basic honest reporting of their management, inventory management initiatives, processing times, things like that. So when you look, for example, at IRCC's own data, so, through access to information, us and other participants and stakeholders get access to a lot of information. And what we've noticed is government initiatives speaking very openly themselves about the fact that at present inventory levels versus targets, they're looking at 6+ years of processing time. So why is it posted as 40? And when you're looking at program requirements, initiatives, Saeed talked about being very clear about what the expectations are, what the standard to be met is, what type of applicant they're looking for in the first place, right? When they're not very clear on that, first, we get startup groups that maybe weren't intended for the program, and then they're clogging up the system and will potentially eventually be failing. We also see things like program standards being changed during the processing, right? So we've experienced a lot of situations where for years in this program, and as many people know, the program's been running since 2013. For many years, if you had a letter of support / commitment certificate from a designated organization, if you made changes to that thereafter, it was readily accepted. If you changed designation of essential to non-essential, changed team members, those were all accepted for many, many years, for hundreds of SUV applicants. But suddenly that is no longer being done, and people are being locked into the letter of support that they filed with the application initially, and it's becoming the determinative issue for refusal. So why are these changes happening, right? My first concern is honesty and integrity in running the program, in running all immigration programs. My experience set for this panel especially possibly comes from the litigation scene. I'm doing a lot of litigation of immigration processing decisions. And so I wrote actually 3 years ago about this issue. I anticipated this problem happening in the SUV program 100%. I advised back then for SUV groups to track their investment of time and resources towards this application in the event that they needed to sue, sorry to say, but sue the government for the management of the program and its administration, because I anticipated the inventory to get out of hand, which is exactly what has happened, because there aren't caps in the program, as one of the attendees of the program noted in the comments. Without a cap, you have an explosive inventory. Initially, the first years of the program had very little inventory. People almost didn't even know of the program and didn't really use it very often. But in the last few years, it's become this, golden tickets seemingly to Canada, and there's been an explosion of applications. And so even when IRCC started seeing that come in, that should have been a red flag. If they didn't want that much inventory, to start putting a pause on the program, a cap on the program. Even now, to this day, when they have an inventory that self-admittedly is going to take more than 6 years for them to process, they're posting processing times of 40 months, which is misleading, if not absolutely dishonest, with all due respect. and also haven't put a cap on the program. So they're increasing the inventory going forward. And I think that's a complete disservice to not only Canadians, but of course the applicants. I think it would be helpful to grow a culture of respect for the time, efforts, and resources of foreign nationals making these applications, for the entrepreneur groups that really could go elsewhere if they knew what was facing them in this program, and for representatives to also be responsible. And really, if you're taking new clients into this stream, especially, that's how Saeed and I started having a conversation about this. I said, you know, I'm not sure if I'm right for the panel, because I can't, in good faith, you know, kind of advocate for more people to come into this program because of all the pitfalls and all of the issues that were happening that new clients could potentially escape by going to other jurisdictions. And that's not desirable by any stretch of the imagination. We would love this this boost that it was meant to be, to come into the Canadian economy. We would love these entrepreneurs to launch their businesses in Canada, but we also have to be responsible and adhere to our professional obligations of being honest and with candor to our clients. The program has significant problems in its processing presently. So I will add to the list of suggestions of what could be done to improve the program. One is, and again, this isn't a popular opinion potentially, but put a pause on the program. If you can't manage the inventory you already have, be honest about that and say, okay, we need to maybe revamp the program, restructure it, but for now, let's just at least not take in more inventory, see what we're going to do with what we have, and, you know, take next steps. And several of the designated organizations have been proven to engage in fraud. So there are multiple federal court judgments that have proven that designated organizations took a large sum of money for their support of startup groups. That is in public record and found as a matter of fact in these federal court decisions, multiple instances for some designated organizations, yet they remain on the list of authorized designated organizations. Why hasn't their certification and authorization been immediately pulled by our IRCC? Why are more applicants being led down a false road of lots of potential problems? Because if they're engaging in someone who's already been proven to engage in dishonest conduct of whatever sort, then your application is going to be under scrutiny. You're going to get a procedural fairness letter. It's going to add timing and additional concerns to address in your application. That needs to be honestly dealt with and practically and swiftly dealt with, so that more people aren't being needlessly set and captured by the same sort of traps. And for those designated organizations where IRCC already has concerns, move your concern forward. Maybe you need to do an immediate blast of procedural fairness letters to everyone that got a commitment certificate from X designated organization. Move your inventory forward. Make whatever concerns you are having with the program public, and kind of more swiftly deal with that. And another tool that I think would be helpful to hold the government to account to do the things that we're suggesting, to make the changes that we think is critical to keeping this program a live potential for our clients, is litigation. Sadly, sometimes that's what really causes the most impactful change. And our firm has launched a group litigation to the refusal of startup visa program applicants, because what we're seeing is that potentially the same thing that happened with the federal self-employed program is exactly happening in this program. So for the audience that won't be aware of this, in the self-employed program, which is the other business stream that is available and is now on pause as well, there was a large explosion of inventory as well. They didn't know what to do with it. They transferred it to an office for that specific kind of processing that Zohra was suggesting, like put several officers with specific training to this, to let them make several decisions a day, which in that case ended up being hundreds a day, and suggestive of something going wrong. And what the litigation proved was that there was and this was found as a matter of fact by the court, that there was a deliberate and calculated decision to suddenly change the process and the standard to be met that those applications were assessed against. And seemingly that's exactly what's happened with the SUV program. Suddenly, when you're looking to clear some inventory, and in that case, the actual term get rid of inventory was used, you are seeing sudden changes of practice and standards to be met, where changes to the letter of support were readily accepted in the past. Now suddenly it's an issue causing an immediate refusal with nothing further, not even a PFL, not even a, well, there are PFLs to be fair, but it's your response is meaningless because they are locking in the letter of support parameters as initially filed with no changes being accepted in terms of the group members. So unfortunately, banding together and asking for accountability may be an additional tool that applicants and stakeholders could be utilizing presently.
Wow, thank you so much for that incredible summary and for the passion, Pantea, that you bring to it. This is why we really needed you on this panel.
I'm nothing if not passionate about these circumstances. The government needs to be held accountable to the promises it's making to foreign nationals.
Right, which brings me to my first question. It's for everybody, and maybe Pantea, maybe you could start on this since you've done so much work on it. How did we get here? How did things go wrong? Now, my understanding, and I wasn't paying attention to this in 2013, but is that the program, when it started, was modeled on at least one other, that it was considered to be, you know, a first-class global program designed for the benefit of Canada, and yet it's so much has gone wrong. It's a complicated program, so there's a lot of moving parts. So you expect that not everything's going to work right. But how did we get it so wrong?
Well, I will ante in on that. I think getting it wrong was very predictable. That's the point. I wrote about this 3 years ago saying this is exactly what's going to happen because there was no inventory management tools put into place. When you know and see a growing number of applicants coming in, you either, if you're going to be committed to that 6 months promise for the program you initially put out there, you either immediately need to increase resources to be able to still maintain that processing time, or you need to put a pause on the program so you control the inventory coming in. They didn't do either. They allowed the inventory and the processing time to grow and grow and grow. Several years ago, even, I think 2-3 years ago, when I started writing about it, the reason was access to information disclosures were making clear that the inventory that they had, even at that time, compared to the targets that they had for this program on an annual basis, meant that they were having 4+ years of processing at that time. And, you know, but the processing time was listed as, like, let's say 2 years. Just like now, processing time is listed as 4 months, but in practical reality, their own agents are confirming in writing, in emails to each other, that they are looking at a 6-year+ processing time for their present inventory, and still there's no pause, and it's continuing to grow. So I think getting it wrong was completely predictable. We just chose to do nothing about it.
Wow, that's such a depressing statement to hear as someone who wants to believe that government is a force for good. Zohra, do you have any thoughts on this about where things went wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also, you know, during COVID, there were so many applications that were submitted, and back then, early days, it was all paper-based. And generally speaking, we expected a pause. We expected, okay, like, how are you possibly going to get through this? And it just didn't happen. But I think the other thing to really consider is that the startup visa program is being used because there are a lack of alternatives. So the program, in the way that it was designed, was really meant for highly innovative companies and, you know, competing on a global scale, and typically one with a technology focus. But because of the closure of other entrepreneurial streams or other entrepreneurial options, there are a number of people who started applying through the startup visa program. So, you know, Pantea was talking about this a few years ago, but even still, as you continue to tighten and close up on other avenues, it's inevitable that people are going to look to the only option that remains available. And so even, you know, recent days of express entry range employments going in the 200 points, there would have been people that potentially would have used express entry, but they can no longer do so. Intercompany transfer is being tightened up for companies looking to launch into Canada where they have successful businesses overseas. LMIA is being tightened. All of that is leading to an increased volume of applicants under the startup visa program. So, the volume that otherwise may not have been as extensive is there because there's no other alternative. And that's also part of the problem here is that the startup visa is kind of your catch-all. It remains open. There's no pause. So long as you can submit your applications, people are going to do so, irrespective if it's the best option for them.
Wow. Saeed, any other thoughts on how things went off the rails?
Of course, and I'm basically coming to this conversation from a purely business standpoint. I don't have much immigration knowledge. I'm not an immigration professional. But one thing I can mention that I think we are kind of losing sight of is that the program started in 2013, and now we're in 2025. World was a very different place in 2013. Actually, that's the time I started my first startup. She built for 4.5, 5 years and got acquired by Humanicare. At the time, for us to build a platform that would enable healthcare providers to connect with patients securely and safely over video, we had to do a team of 10 developers and back-end, front-end design, security, all that, and making sure that the server is proper and all that. And that was considered to be innovative. Now, just the world has changed. The definition of a startup is different now. And I think if you try to look at business relocation and a startup relocation with the lens of 2013, 14, 15, it's just inevitably we are going to fail. I think the government designed this program at the time was brilliant. Perhaps it was informed and they got an idea from Chile. Was the first one actually that did something like this, and there was really this was a means to attract some really good companies. But when you think now about 4 years, 3 years, 6 years, whatever the timeline is for a startup to get processed, that's the entire life cycle of a startup. So that's to begin for starters, kind of a big problem. How did we get here? I think just not IRS and governments in general. I think they're having a little bit of a challenge adapting to this fast-paced changes that are happening in the world. In terms of digitization, in terms of utilizing technology, and also I like IRCC officers, immigration people. They're mostly focused on policy and immigration. So this is a very technical program from a just building a startup. It's in itself a very much a specialized task. I think COVID, as I think two other panelists mentioned, played a big role in the fact that there was no proper way of making submission. I also remember before COVID, the processing times was much faster. And I think what happened because we were not really set up to do the work from home, basically processes, perhaps at the beginning of COVID, when the government shut down, all the businesses shut down, many officers may have been brought back from different embassies to work from home. And look, we are ourselves, we have option to work from home, but honestly, it takes time to get used to it. It takes time to be at the same level of efficiency as you were working from your office desk with your colleagues. And so that that little I think it was a year or so that took for the IRCC to figure out how to cope with the new the new ways of doing things. That started to create the backlog, and that was kind of something that could have probably been handled differently. But now we need to focus on how can we bring back Canada's immigration to a merit-based, high-quality North Star standard that puts today's focus areas, today's needs forefront. We are these group of people, entrepreneurs, investors, are a scarce resource, very much in demand, and we want to also attract and work with people that have other options. So in a way, we want to be in the business, in the sales business. The program has to be such a compelling program that it takes time and effort from us to basically lure people, like to choose us, than other programs. So to give that, that level of credibility. And yes, so that's like, I think COVID had a lot to do with this, and also just the fact that the world is a very different place now. Like a lot of the ideas that may have been submitted in 2013, 14, 15 was very different than the types of ideas that were submitted before COVID. And many of those actually, by the way, are very irrelevant now. Like if especially in digital health, healthcare, things like in industries like that, right? So everything is different now, and I feel like we need to recognize that, and that's why it makes sense to review how things are and renovate based on the realities of today's world and what technology has basically enabled us to accomplish.
All right, just a follow up for anyone who cares to jump in. It sounds like this is more a failure of bureaucracy than politics. Are there politicians to blame for just letting this get out of hand? But is it a problem with the bureaucracy that it wasn't responsive? Does anyone have any sort of insight into how this problem went unnoticed for so long?
Zohra, you want to take that? I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it wasn't noticed. I mean, like I say, we have access to information, discussions between IRCC agents completely acknowledging this. At that time, they were acknowledging that it's going to be 4+ years of processing. At this time, they're acknowledging it's going to be 6+ years of processing. So it's not that they're not aware of it, but they are, for whatever reason, not doing something about it. And to go to Saeed's points as well, I mean, for sure, I understand COVID had an impact, all that stuff. But think of our offices, whatever business you were in, when COVID impacted your ability to deliver services, the responsible thing to do would be to pause your service delivery or reduce it until you could catch up. This wasn't done. It hasn't been done for now 3 years thereafter, right? And when you talk about the life cycle of a startup, that is a critical element to why this is such a huge problem. Because I remember when the program got launched, and even for many years thereafter, IRCC's homepage, landing page on this program acknowledged right out front, 99% of startups fail. They knew that. And they were still asking for people to come in, and they were doing a 6-month processing because after the 6-month period, presumably your startup has failed, right? But now in the life cycle of a startup venture that would have, first of all, been impacted by the lack of work permit, PR being issued by that time, you're half-assed kind of moving it forward. You're not sure if you want to fully invest. You're not sure if you can do some of the work because you don't have authorization and you don't want to be deemed doing unauthorized work and all that stuff. All these things aside, by the time you're actually going to have your application assessed, most likely many of these startups have actually failed either in having fully launched but failed anyway, or failed because of the half-assed nature of being able to move forward. And so, again, what was predictable was that IRCC would then use that as a reason to refuse the applications. So it's an incredibly problematic management issue, in my opinion. And even right now that we're aware of all these problems, at least right now, act responsibly and openly, admit what's going on, admit the delayed processing, pause the program, revamp it if necessary. One thing that was also very interesting, like literally when I see what's happening in this program, it's the exact same management, like inventory management issues that we litigated for 8 years and ongoing in the self-employed program. Exactly the same things we see. We see there are investigations into what the problem is. They self-identify what the issues are, what the pain points are, and they are not rectified. So for example, in the self-employed program, they saw the greatest part of inventory for some visa posts was farmers that they didn't intend to be in this program, small-time farmers that because they didn't make the eligibility criteria very clear and transparent, were clogging up the program. So they finally put a pause on farmers. I think that needs to happen in this program. If the incubation level startups are not what the government really had in mind, they really want people that are ready to go launch, enter economy right away, then eliminate that category from the eligibility. Pause it, eliminate it, whatever you want. Get the SUVs that are ready to launch, that are at the investor level or whatnot. Move forward at least the ones that you are sure you want while you investigate the others that maybe your startup was good or not or whatever. And you also talked about the complication in terms of the very specific skill set that's required in this program to kind of understand the business innovation, if it's good, if it's actually marketable still in this day and age versus, when the applicant may have launched their idea in the first place. That is exactly why the government elected this design for the program. They specifically hired people to do that specific level of nitty-gritty assessment with tools and training that they didn't have. They knew they didn't have that business sense, just like I don't. I'm not, savvy in the business world. I wouldn't know what a great startup is. I do the legal side. I do the immigration side. So that's not my expertise. Exactly what Saeed was saying at the start of the program, that it's causing stakeholders to have to mismanage their expertise, right? So if the government has designated entities to do that level of assessment, why is it now revisiting that? Fraud investigations aside, but an investigation into the viability of the SUV, with all due respect, isn't up to the government if they've now elected this program, this design for the program. So now to go into these, update requests and tell me now quantifiable business economic contribution and things like that, it's almost a slap in the face. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Did you say that you did not have the skill set to do that part of the assessment and, subcontracted it to others? Or are you now going to double dip? In legal terms, we would say that's res judicata. It's already been assessed by one entity and now you're redoing it. And maybe that's also adding to the processing time because they're revisiting those decisions.
Right. Does our panel think that there's a chance to do a reset now? Today is April 30th that we're taping this, and we just had an election 2 days ago. The same party won, but it's under new leadership with Mark Carney, who's supposedly a more experienced, rigorous business guy. Do we have it? And certainly that was why Saeed and I put together the opinion piece that was published in the Financial Post last week, because we wanted to get some attention on this startup visa program during the election campaign to get people thinking about it. Do you think that there's a chance that a new government can take a fresh look at this and maybe get things moving in a different direction? Anyone can answer. Jump in.
I think that it needs to in some way, shape, or form. So there's some comments on the side here that the startup visa is still one of the only programs that allows for permanent residence. It is a permanent residence program. And that's what makes it so appealing to others. And Saeed mentioned that, entrepreneurs, they can go to various other places, and we want them here. We want them in Canada. And that's something that, the Liberal government has been, clear about, that there is a desire to have entrepreneurs and an understanding of what that can do for the Canadian economy. But the program needs to be revamped in a way that allows for these individuals to truly be successful. And so, sure, like in theory, you can get a work permit in 6 months or less. But if you're then coming up to the questions that Pantea noted 40 months down the line, and you potentially may not be successful on your permanent residence application, there's not a lot of incentive to come here on that work permit and start your business and launch your business, irrespective of the fact that you can have a work permit. Because the questions that we're seeing now from officers, they are business questions. Tell us about your business and the growth and the success and what have you done. And you know, when we're counseling our clients, we're trying to say, this is a business question, but please let's develop an answer that is mindful of the audience being an immigration officer, because they're not going to understand the nuances of the business or the business world, just like we don't as legal counsel. So there needs to be, if the idea is that you have experts in the field who have been designated by the minister, these are their responsibilities, make those responsibilities clear, make it clear to officers that these are not their responsibilities, and allow for things to move ahead. And certainly, you know, I'm not sure if you can necessarily just start fresh. You close the program down and start fresh, because there are people who've been waiting for 40 plus months. If there is another option that could be looked at, but in line with whatever happens in the startup visa program, there should be an understanding that there needs to be the development of other programs as well to allow for people to come to Canada without having to try to stuff their application into the startup visa program, because there were programs that were better suited for some entrepreneurs as opposed to the startup visa, and reopening certain programs would definitely assist in ensuring that only the types of businesses that Canada is looking to attract through this program come through this program, as opposed to everybody who thinks it's a permanent residence program, the language score is a little bit lower, I don't need a net worth, all of these potential things. Let's not have that be the reason why people are applying to the startup visa program. Let's have it because they are innovative, can compete on a global scale, are going to be creating jobs, what the program is truly meant to support.
So sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I agree. I mean, we for the last hour or whatnot have all been discussing the ways that the program can be saved and improved immediately. And, you know, the pausing of inventory, revamping, elimination of maybe the incubator level businesses, things like that. They're all tools that are kind of low hanging fruit type of thing with tremendous impact. Don't get me wrong. You know, there are lots of people who have many years or months of resources built into this that suddenly, if we change it to they're not eligible anymore, will have lost so much. But at least it's a hope for the program remaining reputable in the global business community to be able to attract other things. And you know, some comments coming in is the whole system is broken, and I agree. The immigration system has so many broken parts and so many parallel lessons unlearned, unfortunately, which makes it so concerning. I would have thought, okay, you have problems in spousal sponsorship, this, that, the other. I thought heightened attention would be paid to this program, because you're looking at the very sophisticated cream of the crop of the business entrepreneur stream globally, and that this program would have hopefully been better managed to make sure we become internationally reputable as a reasonable, reliable way of attracting their resources and business ideas into our economy. But seeing this program this mismanaged as well, unfortunately, doesn't give me a lot of hope. There are, of course, possibilities, but hope as to whether the government's going to take those steps, I'm unsure of.
Saeed, can I ask you, is this program worth saving? Do you have an example that you could tell us about in 30 seconds where it actually worked right, where we actually got the good entrepreneurs came in and started businesses and have become successful?
Of course. Look, I'm an engineer by background and an entrepreneur, so inherently I'm naively optimistic always and want to solve, fix, and re-engineer everything. So I think this is an amazing program. Actually, I gently and respectfully disagree with my fellow panelists. I think not only we should but we shouldn't pause. We should double down. We should expand. We should increase the umbrella, because what I'm seeing as a firm that does business relocation to many countries, of course, Canada as being our major focus, I think other countries are a race right now for the successful, affluent, entrepreneurial people around the world. Yes, and we have had some really good success stories. As a matter of fact, I had the pleasure of working with a team, very unique cancer diagnostic tool, uh, amazing team of founders, brilliant startup founders. Had the pleasure of working with them, and we got to the point that even we published an article, me and the CEO of that company in the Canadian healthcare technology, about our experience navigating the Canadian medtech system and all that. So yes, I've seen some really qualified candidates, and the program, and I've seen some, not very qualified candidates, but long story short, this is a very good program. I think like the message we're trying to put across that I'm advocating for is that we need to renovate the program, and we need to fix it, and we need to expand it. I'm not an immigration professional, but sometimes I think, and maybe my fellow panelists could tell me if I'm out of my mind or if there's some merit to what I'm saying, is that can we use other because I know that there is a cap for 1,000 or 2,000 applicants per year for the economy class. Is there other ways for us to, utilize other programs that are existing already, to push some of the 30,000 that are in the waiting, in those channels? Can we create, get innovative, use the current tools that we have in our Rolodex, work with IRCC to figure out pathways that not only would help, the founders to thrive and get to the current backlog. This is when I'm talking about the current backlog, and also help to solve some of the immediate challenges that Canada has right now and is dealing with. So that's kind of what keeps me thinking.
I'm thinking we have about 30,000 MBA students in Canada. We've got 30,000 companies there. Can we just get some good minds focused on these projects?
Yeah.
Question for the two remote panelists. Is Saeed out of his mind?
I mean, I think it's wishful thinking a little. I think we're seeing there were layoffs from IRCC, less and less staff being available, and I see that programs are closing as opposed to being opened or used or having resources directed elsewhere. So I mean, I think it would be great. I just don't know if it's realistic, but happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah. And I want to be clear. I'm not advocating for the program to be shut down or anything. I actually think it's a tremendous program. I definitely think the program is worth saving, worth expanding. I just, as a lawyer, am saying that it's not necessarily practical, reasonable, and responsible to just say, let's double down, let's double the inventory when we know that these problems exist that haven't been addressed. Exactly, like there are now further cuts in IRCC. There's going to be less personnel available to do these applications, even on a dedicated basis, that could really bring down the inventory. But to your question, Saeed, of what we could do for those applicants in queue to try to do something faster, unfortunately, yes, other programs are closing, and we don't have other business programs, and that's part of the problem for sure. But what we've been helping and strategizing with some clients to do is they have been using their Canadian work experience towards their startup visa to kind of qualify within the express entry system. And sadly, some are even moving to a humanitarian-based application. I mean, it's incredible for people to have invested so much money and then be kind of begging the government for a PR under the humanitarian stream. But that is happening in some circumstances because they really need that confirmation of stability in Canada going forward to really launch and invest and put their full effort into it. But those, especially the humanitarian program, has a very long processing time as well. But in that program, there's potential to kind of really press for at least an initial approval in principle that could give you that sense of security, while then you move forward with the rest of the processing, security and whatnot. So that's kind of one of the strategies that we've been utilizing and trying to help with clients in the backlog.
We've only got a couple more minutes, but I do have a couple more questions. So if we get maybe just quick rapid fire responses from the panel. Is this still worth doing? Is the original idea that there is a very valuable group of entrepreneurs, experienced business leaders who are wishing to emigrate, who would love to start a business in Canada, is that still a functioning thesis, or have they all found landing spots and maybe there aren't enough good people out there worth throwing these resources at?
I think for sure it's still worthwhile. I still think that we want to be there. We want to be Canada to be a place where people who are innovative are looking to come to. And I think Canada is a great place to be. Many, many people know that. There just needs to be a clear path for them to get here and stay here.
And for sure, I mean, even more people coming into the program is still an option. And, many people, that is their only remaining option. So as long as people are forthcoming about the problems, the processing times, for sure, let's invite more people into the program. The inventory is going to grow, the processing time is going to grow, but if they're aware of that and still willing to make that investment, 100%.
If I want to chime in, continuing on my optimism, actually, look, I've built a company in healthcare as an engineer, so I understand, when sometimes I'm overly ambitious and can be wishful thinking, but I remember in 2015 when we started the virtual care company that we were able to get acquired in 2018 with Tranquil. We were going around begging insurance companies like Manulife and Sun Life to accept a receipt for a virtual visit. Like something that's very much known and common practice today was a miracle at the time. So, and we were able to do it. Look, I understand. It's like we're talking about government, like things move slow, but we need to be bold and we need to act fast. And that's why, I'm very much still think this is worthwhile. And what I'm talking about, to be very specific, is that like there are some, when I was looking at the PR, allocations, there are some programs that provincial or federal that are not being used to their fullest potential. As an outside observer, with very limited immigration understanding, and I'm just thinking maybe there could be ways to redirect some of the current queue into those pathways to create, faster processing for the current queue. Anyways, but long story short, absolutely, this is worthwhile. I love the program. I think this is brilliant. The other countries, they like it so much that they are, learning from our learnings and pitfalls and fixing it. And yes, I can also chime in on some of what best practices that other countries do if there's more time, but I think we're kind of running out of time. Yes.
We're definitely running out of time. I'm really excited that we've had such an animated discussion. We didn't get to all our questions, so I apologize to the panelists that we didn't get to them all. But I think we've had a great discussion, and we've got some directions to look at for the futures. I think that's great. My final question for each panelist is, if you had a magic wand, this is a big problem. It's a big program with a lot of problems. But if you had a magic wand that granted you just one wish for one change in the Startup Visa program, what would you want that one change to be? Pantea, why don't you go first?
Sure. For me, the SUVs that have gotten the higher level commitments, the angel commitments, which should, by all intents and purposes, demonstrate that they are good, ready to go, to immediately move them forward, immediately allow them to bring their business idea here full force without trepidation as to whether they'll be able to get PR or not. I think even if they got a work permit with an assurance that eventually when we get to your application, it will be approved so long as you're following the model that you've initially promised, that needs to happen. The people that are ready to put their money into our economy should not be lost in the processing queue.
All right. Saeed, let's break the pattern and have you go next.
Okay, if I could enable one change is to open up and expand the program to basically redefine the definition of a startup visa applicant under the startup visa manual to expand them to advisor slash investor to an existing company rather than an active manager and with 10% of voting share in the company. That would be my change.
And just tell us why. You got 10 seconds.
10 seconds on why I think you can bring the camera back on me. Yes, I think this would really put the entrepreneur in a position that they love. They would enjoy it tremendously. And like, look, they're also sophisticated people with a lot of experience, and they can help Canadian businesses to move forward. Also, and now that we're looking for new trade partners around the world, these guys could be agents that could help us to build bridges with new markets and help our businesses to expand and go global. More than 10 seconds.
Okay. Zohra, the last word goes to you. One last final fix.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it would be immigration officers cannot ask business questions. That's it. If they have a business question, if they need to know something about the business, if they're not sure about the viability of the business, they can expand the scope of the peer review. They can connect with DOs, but for officers, like they should not be in the course of a review of a work permit or PR, be asking the applicant to demonstrate the legitimacy of the business or demonstrate progress of the business in the way that they currently do.
Wow. Three great closing statements, some great action items throughout this. So this is just the beginning of a dialogue. We want to keep this going. We want to hear from you. We're going to stay in touch with Zohra and Pantea and see, where can this go? Can we actually get some change? Is the new government, a new opportunity? So thanks very much for joining us, to all three panelists. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I hope much comes out of it. And thank you for joining us as the audience, and we hope you'll stay in touch, offer your thoughts in the comments, get in touch with us at NextStars, at LinkedIn or other platforms where you can learn more about us and future events. For more information regarding our guest, please visit jafarilaw.ca or KPMG Law in Toronto. If you have comments on this event, please share them, talk about it with your friends, recommend this video to them, and let's really get a dialogue going. Thank you so much for your interest in this very important project. Thank you again to the panelists. We hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.